Welcome to MomFit with Joe Peters. This is the Spanish World Network and the H.E.R Network at Single TV channels 250 and 251. As always, if you have a topic or a subject or a question that you would like me and my guests to go deeper into, please go to Instagram and send me a DM at Joe Unicorn Coach, like you can see in the video. And me and my team are going to work with what you need and find the perfect guest to talk about your special topic. Remember, Joe, Unicorn Coach. Also, please remember to download the Single TV app on the respective app stores on iOS Android devices. While you are downloading, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Single TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV Stick, Roku, and Roku sticks in all smart TVs. Today, I have the pleasure to talk with somebody that you all know that I always talk about our support system. I think that all of us need to have a Cynthia in our support system, especially with the conditions that are happening in the world. Because moms, either if you're pregnant or if you're a new mom or you're a mom of several, that is something that probably we all can agree and is getting scary to think about the future of our children. So um Cynthia is the author of From Changing Diapers to Changing the World, why mom make a great advocate and how to get started. She's a nonpartisan activist working across a variety of issues. Cynthia coaches volunteers of all ages to build productive relationships with members of the Congress. She advocates side by side with her two children for from their toddler to teen years and craft a new approach to advocacy based upon her strengths as a mother. She is currently a volunteer with Results, the One Campaign, Bread for the World, H.E.R, Moms on Demand, Actions for Gun Sense in America, Mom Rising, and the UN Foundation
I know.
Young Life campaign. So I am super excited to talk with Cynthia today because we as moms are tired, overwhelmed, scared. And what we were talking before we start the show live, sometimes we say like, what else I can do? I'm just a mom. I'm scared to death about the future of my children, but what else I can do? So Cynthia, thank you so much for being here. Why we don't just start with what I always ask my guests is share a phrase, and I love yours. Let's gonna start a little bit with that phrase, and then a little bit about your story about how you move from I'm just a mom into start working to build a future and change the world. So her phrase is be good, be careful, use common sense, and have fun if you can do all that. And then she put that her mom every time her mom said that every time that she and her sister left the house growing up. So
Yep.
welcome to the show, Cynthia, and let's gonna have a fantastic time.
Thank you. My mom's going to love that you put that up front because now that's going to go out and maybe other moms will say it to their kids.
So it's be good, be careful, use common sense,
Yep.
and have fun if you can do all of that at once.
If you can manage that. My sister had it put on a t-shirt for us.
There we go. There we go. Well, Cynthia, let's gonna talk a little bit about your story and how all these from changing diapers to changing the world movement start for you, and how you find that need for moms to start actually taking actions that are bite size, so we can start working on the same path to create some change that we want and need in the world.
Oh, I love that phrase bite-sized because that's what we try to do without taking off more than biting off more than we can chew. My story is a story about moving from a powerlessness, feeling powerless, and moving to empowerment. I was not somebody who came from a background of, like you said, that, I wrote this book, it's about advocacy, but I didn't come from a background of political science. I didn't want to run for Congress or anything like that. I have a STEM background. I was an engineer, and I was just, oh yeah, happily going about doing that. And then I discovered, when I was gonna have my first child, that I looked around and there were a lot of people being laid off at my company anyway, and I thought, "This is a good time for me to, uh, stay at home, with my child," because I also couldn't find, the satisfying affordable healthcare, which is another problem in our country. So that was a choice that I made at the time, and, it had an unexpected effect on me, that suddenly I felt like I didn't have the identity that I had built up. Like, I saw myself as a professional engineer, and most of my friendships came through work. And all of a sudden, I was at home with a baby that I didn't exactly know how to take care of because it was my first one. So I felt a little out of my depth, and I didn't have any friends to start out with. And I would just, we were talking about where we live in the country. At the time, I was in Chicago. So it was winter in Chicago. And you don't just go traipsing around with your baby outside um, at that time of year. So I was feeling very lonely, a lot like having a pandemic baby, actually, but not that bad. Um, and I was just listening to a lot of news. I would turn on National Public Radio, and at the time, there were famines going on. I was hearing about earthquakes, and uh, I didn't know what to do. Like, I would hear about other moms, and this was like the first time. Of course, I cared about people in poverty. I would go to church and hear about it, but this is the first time that it really hit me. Like, what would it be like if I didn't have the resources, if I didn't have clean water? And, I'll even share, since we have the luxury of time here, I had a scary experience in the first few days of my child's life where, I just didn't have the hang of breastfeeding, and I didn't know that I'm the kind of mom that the breast milk kinda comes in later, like a few days later. You too. It's not uncommon, but I wasn't prepared for that, so I was just trying to breastfeed, like, all the time. I'm like, "What's the matter?" And they have a little soft spot on the top of their head that it sinks down when they don't get enough, fluid.
Liquids.
Yeah, and I was like, "What's going on?" There were no wet diapers, and my I called my doctor, and she was just like, "Yes, your baby is starving, but all you have to do," and by the way, this is Christmas Eve. I'm freaked out. She's like, "You have to go to the pharmacy and get some formula and mix it up and give it to the baby. Your baby's gonna be fine." But in those days, couple days, I was really scared, and so I felt for the first time what it would be like to have a baby that's not thriving. Thank goodness I did have, uh, access to a doctor to tell me that. I had access to clean water. I could literally run down to the drugstore and get that. So I could see firsthand what it's like when you have those things and you can have an intervention that turns a infant's life around. So I started thinking about, why what is preventing us from doing this for other mothers all around the world? And I would start reading. I started reading about global hunger and all these things, but the problem was I didn't know what to do about it. So, thankfully, I mentioned my church. There was somebody at church that noticed me in distress in this way and introduced me to an organization called Bread for the World that wrote letters to Congress that dealt with global hunger. And it blew my mind that it might make a difference for me when I was up at night when a baby couldn't sleep anyway. After I got her back to bed, got them back to bed, I was just like, wide awake. So I could take that time, write a little letter to Congress, and I could add my voice to many others, thousands of other people who were asking for the same thing, and we could bring help to moms and babies around the world. So I'll stop there. That was a long
No,
answer to.
it's lovely, and that is something that this is going to be an emotional
Let's have all the emotions. Let's do it.
episode for me. But being a Hispanic in a different country, it's matter of, one of the things that I always talk is it requires a village.
Yeah.
And one of the things that struck me a lot when I was in Africa was that sense of village, of support. And society in some way is keeping us as mothers so concerned about our own journey that we forget that we still can be that village for those other moms. That and then something that is being very known, and we have several levels of this white race privilege, that sometimes things as simple as what you said, we don't even stop to be aware of that. Some of the things that, and I know that because breastfeeding was an issue for me, and I also have the luxury to be able to afford a lactation consultant and a postpartum doula and all of these things to support my journey to be good. And then when you start contrasting those limited percentage that had access to all that versus infant mortality, mom's mortality in the fourth trimester, because like you were saying, is it's a overwhelming topic, and this is what I want to go deep with you, because it's an overwhelming topic. We can feel like you were feeling hopeless.
Right.
So you will not believe how many times I just throw my phone and say like, I freaking hate the world, and I just want to take a spaceship with my husband and my child and go and live in a planet by ourselves. Humanity is horrible.
We're still looking for that planet. Still looking for it.
But that the reality is as overwhelmed as it can be. That is exactly what some of these people that are running, and Cynthia's in the United States, but I think that this applies to every country in the world. These people that are running our governments, our countries, that are not putting our children and us as moms as one of the priorities. Because the reality is this, ladies: if we all decide to not have kids anymore, humanity will end in less than 2 generations. That's it. So how we can, like Cynthia, how we can go from that overwhelming despair into I can do something about this. And when you were talking, one of the things that I remember when I was growing up in Colombia is the story about the starfish.
Yes.
So, for the ones that are not familiar with that, is a little girl is walking the beach and just throwing starfish back to the ocean, back to the ocean. And she had miles in front of her starfish. And then an old guy, started looking at her every day and start thinking like, that is stupid. She will never be able to save all of them. Why she waste that time? Until one day he asked her, like, little girl, why you don't just go play and do something else? Like, you know that you're not going to be able to save them all and make a difference for all of them. And the little girl pick up the star, throw it in the ocean, and said, it make a difference for this one. So I think that part of what I want to talk with you, Cynthia, is how we can go from the generic of I want to change it all to be specific and be very clear into what we can change, how
Yeah.
we can help.
And that's really interesting that you bring up that particular story because uh, sometimes when I do direct service, and direct service is what I would call when I work at a food pantry, or if I stop and help somebody on the street, it matters to that one, and that is important for my soul and for that person. And the advocacy that I do, the activism that I do, it doesn't always occur to people that this is something that we can do. And when we live in the United States, we have a right to speak up, and not everybody in every country has that. But when we work together to change a policy, then we don't just help the one person, the one starfish, we help the others on the beach too. And it's funny because we talk about this and it's a matter of scale, right? So we're not helping maybe all the starfish in the world, but I found that this advocacy and activism helped me to increase my impact so that I didn't have a lot of money when I started. I just quit my job, I told you, and my husband had quit his job to start a company. So by the way, I do not recommend this as a life path to quit your jobs when you have a baby. Um, but like I didn't have a lot of money to donate, and I wasn't a person of influence. But I found that by being empowered and learning how to do these steps that we're going to talk about in activism, I found that I could have much more influence and I could actually get to know members of Congress and turn things here, turn things there. And well, I'm going to stop there, but it was helping more people made me feel like a better person, a better citizen, and a stronger mom, too.
And I love that because one of the things that I always talk with my moms when we are working in a more private setting is one of the most powerful questions that we as moms need to learn to ask for all areas, if, including this one that we are talking, is who can help me with this? So
Oh,
if we are feeling that stress, that despair, who can help me with this, and connect with people like Cynthia, connect with people like the Moms Demand Action groups that are already organized. So because the reality is what Cynthia is saying is the first thing is, oh, I'm barely making my life with my kid. I cannot um, donate money. And then there is a little voice that says, "Oh, the only thing that they want is money donation." But when we start asking, "Who can help me with this?" we can start finding, "Oh, I can. It can take as little as I did it yesterday for something, um, as little as 30 seconds of adding your name and your information to a petition that is already moving. So it's important to know that you are not alone, and then you is not a black and white. I think that is one of the biggest messages for me. Is not, don't feel that you need to be like Cynthia and dedicate your entire life to advocacy to make a difference. And if you don't do that, then you just wipe your tears in the bathroom every couple of days and move on. You can find a middle point there that is aligned with your circumstances right now, with your lifestyle right now, with the time that you have right now. And then that, the other one that I was thinking is that story from one of the several religious paths that talk about the widow that gave everything that she had, that was just
yes. Yeah.
penny cents, versus the rich person that gave just a little bit, but in comparison the rich person was a lot bigger than the widow. But the message was, she gave everything that she had. She did the best that she could with what she had. So that is a lot more valuable and important that trying to burn
Yeah.
yourself out. So go ahead.
And, that is, I love that you brought it to that point because it gets to kind of meeting people where they're at and what they can do at the time. And here we are, we're on a mom show talking to moms, and we don't have a lot of time. And this is why I wrote the book that I did. And again, it's called From Changing Diapers to Changing the World: Why Moms Make Great Advocates and How to Get Started. And I wrote it for mothers and others who want to learn to use their voice to change these things in impactful ways and the most efficiently. So I've included a lot of tips about how to advocate, even if you don't have a lot of time, because moms are often doing this work like on the go. But I heard from people who aren't parents that they love my book because I lay out the instructions on how to take action very clearly. And I offer things that you can do if you only have 20 minutes or only 5 minutes. But another thing that I want to mention to people is like, I got started with that couple minute letter, right? And action sometimes inspires more action. And then I learned how to make a phone call to Congress because I was somebody who's like kind of nervous. I thought the other person on the other end of the phone was going to be like, "Hey, why do you think that?" and challenge me. And that's not the way it is. The other person on the end of the phone when you call Congress is an admin of some type who's just taking down your opinion. And that's the way it goes. Um, but my book gives you these instructions on how to do more and more and more when you're ready for it. So the next thing that I did was to learn to write a letter to the editor, which was a little scary for me. And a letter to the editor, if uh, viewers don't know, it's a piece in the newspaper that anybody can write to a newspaper. It's about 150 to 200 words, and it just gives your opinion on something. And members of Congress care a lot what people say about them in the newspaper. So if you mention their name and I say, Congresswoman Ann Wagner should um, help moms who are hungry and need this, whatever it is I want to say. If I put it out there, then more people see it and members of Congress pay more attention to it. So that was another step. And there's a whole lot of steps that you can do until you get to what I think the gold standard is of advocacy, which is getting to know your senator or your representative. And that just blew my mind to hear the organization that I worked with before, Bread for the World, another one called Results, is extremely good at this, that they teach relational advocacy, how to build a relationship with the members of Congress and their staff. So when I went down to my polling place, I actually saw my member of Congress and she came in and she went, "Well, hi, Cindy." And she went inside and did her thing. And I was like, "Can we talk for a second?" And she knew what I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to talk about global, global maternal child health because we'd been doing it a lot. So it's a long journey. And I wrote the book because I didn't want everybody else to take years to do it like I did, trying to figure out who it was, to find, as you mentioned, like my village. I didn't have any friends when I quit my job, but I found this other village and all these activists who could support me and teach me how to do it. What I've tried to do is to put all these things in these pages and instructions and funny stories, stories about other moms from other races and backgrounds, economic levels, and put together some inspiration and package it all together so you can do my journey of 15 years, at your own pace and not need to flounder about like I did.
And I love that. And I think that that goes into the first big topic that I want to talk with you. And it is how, with the mindset, moms can move from thinking, I can't change the world, I'm just a mom, to I can change the world because I am a mom.
Yeah. It really that is my whole goal. If I have these different causes that I work on that you mentioned, but right now, if I have a mission in life, is to bring moms from that place of powerlessness. I, I'm a mom. I don't have time. People won't listen to me anyway. To that part of like, oh, I am uniquely suited to this because I'm a mom. And within the book, I have 5 reasons, and I think there are a lot more than 5, by the way, but I have kind of come down to 5 reasons that I think that moms make great advocates. And some of them are because I think our children, they don't mean to do it, but they naturally train us to be great advocates. For instance, they make us explain things over and over and over again. How many times have you said, it's like, I've explained this to you. Okay, I'll try to explain this to you a different way. I'll use smaller words. I will say it louder. you know, um, we become expert explainers of things. And when we're at our best, which I'm not always at my best, but when we're at our best, we do it with compassion and patience. And I have a little joke that if you can explain something to a second grader, that then you can definitely explain it to a member of Congress. And I'm not saying that because they're, childish or anything like that. It's not a snarky thing. It's just saying that everybody likes a good story and everybody likes things to be said clearly. So sometimes before I'm going to go um, lobby a member of Congress, I would go to a Girl Scout troop or a Boy Scout troop and get them to write little letters to Congress. But talking to them forced me to take this government policy and squish it down into the clearest parts, because if I can't hold their attention, I will not hold the attention of someone who has 10 more meetings to go to and has a billion other things on their mind. So um, they can train us in this way. They train us to be, oh, go ahead.
No, one thing that I wanted to say that because I love that you said like is you are making the comparison of the second grader with the congressman, not because you are mocking them, but I want to actually reinforce that because in my previous life I was an executive in corporate America and I worked for companies like PepsiCo and Goodyear. And one of the things that I and those companies train executives around the world is whenever they are creating their objectives, their vision, their mission to be cascaded, the first step is take that you create with your small group into a 12 to 14-year-old teenager. And they literally that is being part of my homework to these executives around the world. If your child above 8, 9 years old is able to understand what you are saying, then that is ready to be cascading, disseminate for everybody to understand. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, because as we start growing old, we start trying to make things a lot more complicated. So I love how you are bringing it back into how our children teaching us that and how they can also be a closed loop whenever we want to take action to help us to really understand if how easy it can be.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that this is communications 101, really, but we don't automatically think. A lot of us separate a professional and a motherhood life, but really they can come together. There's something else I think that mothers and other caregivers, dads, grandparents, teachers. I talk to the PTA, the Parent Teacher Association, sometimes. I think that, being around children helps us to be persistent. Like, how many times do you have to tell your kids to pick up the laundry off the floor? I mean, a lot if they're like 4 and don't even understand. But even, having teens, it's quite a bit. So, you get this sort of you develop a patient but urgent mom face, which is really useful in Congress. That, sometimes, what they're doing, it's not even necessarily their fault that something doesn't get done. And I'll just tell a little story that I had something that I wanted my a member of Congress to sign on to, and it was a senator and Senator Durbin's office, I believe. And they said, sure, we'd love to sign on to that. And there's somewhere where we can watch and see if they really do it. And if their name appears on it, then they've done it. And his name just kept not showing up, not showing up. And so I would call back and I would leave a reminder and stuff like that. But because I was patient and thorough and kept asking, it turned out that it wasn't their office. It was the other office that they needed to call, that they hadn't recorded it. So sometimes it's a matter of being frustrated or needing to be persistent to change somebody's mind. But sometimes it's just a bureaucracy thing. And man, how many times do moms have to stay on the phone and figure out like what's going on with our health insurance? What's going on with our heating or our, whatever is happening? This is all great training for advocacy. But before we run out of time on this topic, I do want to share what I think is the most important thing, is that the reason that moms make great advocates is because we are powerful and we don't always see that in ourselves. But I'm going to ask viewers to think about, can you think of a time when you were like consumed with empathy when you were watching a commercial or a TV show and you saw something where parents couldn't give their kids what they need or something, and and you just find yourself like crying because you're watching this thing. And sometimes I used to think that that was a weakness to get emotionally choked up like that. But I'm here to tell you that that ability to internalize somebody else's story, even if it's a commercial, but if you're watching the news and hear a real story, that ability to do that gives you great power because caring and empathy are contagious. And not in the COVID way, but in the best possible way. That vulnerability can be your strength because I have gone in to talk to members of Congress, like their aides or something. And when I tell a story of something that happened to a mom across the world who could never reach that person because of distance and circumstances, and I see that person, when I see their face begin to change, soften, maybe even tear up, then I know that I've reached across with that empathetic power. So that ability to turn your emotions into positive, constructive action, that can be your superpower. And I was thinking of that when I saw the intro to the show, like the super mom with the baby, like that's it. That's the stuff. And
Absolutely. And it's just funny that you bring the perseverance because I actually make a live about that yesterday because
ah,
I watched my 22-month-old stay perseverant for over 45 minutes
mm.
without without crying, without nothing, trying to convince me that sleep time was over, that it was time to get out. So I was making a live of like, who can teach us more perseverance than that journey of mom and dad and child. But one thing that I love about what you were saying is that we go more into that I'm also very big feminist into that was labeled as a weakness was all about a very male dominant energy, and what is being doing is keeping us trapped away from our power because we are different than male. They have their strengths, and that one is not one of theirs. And then sometimes that could be scary because I agree with you. Being able to have that empathy and that connection and being able to allow others to feel with you is a superpower that we can use. So one of the things that I think that is important is, and I want to hear your opinion here too. I've been debating about this a lot, and that is something that the minority, and I know that I have a lot of privilege with this, but I have the fortune to be able to travel around the world, and because of that, I have a lot of options to see what is possible. And sometimes in Colombia and the United States, in some countries, what I see is moms just almost getting numb and getting used to it to this is the way. So I only have 6 weeks maternity, it's not even maternity leave. I only have 6 weeks PTO after I give birth, and then it's normal for me to go back.
Right.
And because that is for some people the only thing that they see and have access to, then it becomes the reality when we have a contracts of some countries that offer 18 months.
Yeah.
And then the research is showing more and more that at 6 months our bodies is still healing. So I want you to also talk a little bit about that, about how we can start expanding the possibilities and break that little eggshell that sometimes we get into of just getting numb and assuming that things like that are normal.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, what especially when we just have our kids, like my world got really small very quickly. And so for a while it was just how do I care for what's right in front of me? And I think that sometimes in various times of our life we lack the vision to dare to think that things could be different for us. And I absolutely believe with you that a global perspective is very helpful in seeing those things that you might actually run into somebody who says like, "What, you only get 4 weeks or 6 weeks? Or what? That's crazy." You know? Um, so I think something that's incredibly helpful is to intentionally, expand our mindset and our worldview, and one thing that's really helped me with that is being involved with some of the organizations that I have been with along the way, like, the One Campaign and Results have been very good about engaging activists, from other countries. And if it hadn't been for, Results having an international conference every year where it was in Washington, DC, and they brought in, uh, activists from all over the world. Results is a global organization. And sometimes they would say, "Okay, Cynthia, you're going to, go with Evelyn, and she's from Kenya. So can you take her around to your members of Congress?" Which was eye opening for our members of Congress too, because maybe they'd never spoken to someone from Kenya before. Um, and I'm trying to think of other places I've worked with people from Uganda and Ghana. And uh, it, it my involvement opened their eyes to things that can be different on their side, and they did the same for me. So I guess what I'm saying is, you were making the point that it's because of privilege that some of the population gets to travel around the world and others don't. And that was not something that I got to do before. But now, when I work with these other organizations, um, I can use my computer and I can talk to them. And, now I have friends in all of these different countries that can help expand my viewpoint. So I hope that adds to your observations a little bit.
Absolutely. I love it because, again, we go into that all or nothing. If I cannot travel around the world, then that means that I cannot get out of this like little tiny box. What Cynthia is sharing is what other options we have now with the world like it is. If anything was a blessing from COVID, was that COVID pushed this boundary beyond. Cynthia, two things that I want to talk with you before we go. Um, the part of what do you mean when you say, I love how you say, if we work together, we can change policies to make our lives and our family's life better. And then
Mhm.
to be a powerful activist, your main job is to put yourself forward and say, I care. Let's want to expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to talk about because I felt I didn't understand that at the beginning when I started advocating. Like I said before, came from this kind of engineering background, and I was like, I have to study everything, and why should I open my mouth? Why should I write a letter to the editor, for goodness sakes? Why would anybody listen to what I have to say when I'm not an issue expert? I haven't done these things. Um, but I was unaware that there's such a thing in the world as putting out your opinion on things. And you can have an informed opinion by doing some research and talking to these different groups and learning about gun violence and what it's doing to your community, or what, you know, I learned that tuberculosis was the most infectious disease before COVID. And now that COVID is subsiding, tuberculosis is once more. I wouldn't have known that unless I did some research, but I didn't have to know everything about everything. And I didn't have to have a lot of money or be a person of influence. All I had to do was to exercise my right as somebody who lives in America. And notice I didn't say being a citizen. If you live here, you can talk to a member of Congress. You don't have this is not a right that's guaranteed by citizenship. They take care of everybody who lives in their district. That's their job. So if you can just go in and say, I care, and this is why I care, that is the most important thing. I can follow up with a lot of like websites. Like if I go in with, let's take the organization CARE, for instance, care.org. That's another one that works on a lot of women and girls issues. Um, I can walk in with a fact sheet from them and they can read it on their own. But if I say, I have I have 2 kids And I can see what's happening to girls around the world that don't have education. And I am aware that uh, girls who do not have an education are much more likely to be married before the age of 18. I see my kids and I see girls in other countries not having the same opportunities. That's why I care, is because I want other kids to be as well loved and taken care of as mine. That's something that they're not going to find on the fact sheet, and so I don't want anybody to stop being in action because they think they need to um, get some sort of degree or something like that. And you don't have to do it perfectly. And you can make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. One of the most common mistakes for a global activist to make is to trip up on the words million or billion. And it makes a big difference if you're asking for $2 million or $2 billion or something. And I was thinking the last time I made that mistake, um, the aide that I was talking to kind of like smiled and like kind of nodded her head, and then she wrote down the correct one because she knew what I meant. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to do it. And especially when we work in teams, when I show up at my state Capitol Hill with Moms Demand Action, and there's a sea of red T-shirts, I know that all those women have my back if I make a mistake, and I am there to help them. All we have to do is show up.
Show up, care, and know that you have a village behind you. Before we go, one last thing that I want to talk with you, we get emotional again, is there's been a lot of things going on in the world, in the United States, in France. Like they are, I think energetically is part of we are getting an end of an era, and there is a lot of things moving on. So I want to finally touch base with you on this part that I would love to hear your pick your brain and hear your thought is how scary change can be, and how when we get close to change it's possible that we get a lot of resistance and a lot of
Yeah.
pushback because getting that change is uncomfortable, is something new, is something that we never did before. But that doesn't mean that that change is bad. That doesn't mean that we should not keep moving forward. So let's gonna talk a little bit before we go into that part of that transition of where we are, that things are gluey and icky and we have resistance and fear of the change, and how we move into keep moving towards that change, knowing that yeah may not be perfect, but it's an improvement that we can keep improving.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of what you just brought up has to do with privilege and patriarchy, right? Because some of the changes that I'm pushing for anyway have to do with access to certain things for people in poverty, and you cannot separate uh, poverty from systemic racism. And I'm not just talking about the United States; I'm talking about everywhere. And I didn't coin this phrase. This came from somebody else that I don't remember, but it rings true anyway. That when people in privilege, when you have been used to your voice being heard all the time, and when you're used to having all that influence, then somebody else speaking up sounds like they're attacking you. And so that can inspire people to, really push back and push back hard when those who are not in power and those who have been oppressed begin to speak up for the, just basic human rights that they need. So, like you were saying, there's a lot of backlash. There's a lot, but what that says to me is that is sometimes a fear response, and that means that I'm doing the right thing, and we're getting close. I mean, you can see this a lot with we've referenced gun violence quite often in this hour, and I I think we're getting close on this. There's some really bad bills being passed in my state in Missouri. We're we're fighting hard against a bill that is saying that it would be okay to have guns in churches and on buses. But the reason that the NRA and other organizations are doubling down on that is because they see the power that moms and other people are wielding as they rise up, and um, it means we're getting close. That's what I think.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Now that we are getting close to the end of the episode, what I would love for you to do is, if you could just take one message to all these moms around the world that really want the best world for their children, what that message will be. And then if they want to connect with you, or if they want to explore a little bit more about that, please remind us how they can find your book, and also what other channel they have available to start changing the world because they are moms.
The one last message, we've given so many great things that are usually my one last message, but I will say to each and every person, you are uniquely situated. You have a story, and sharing your story can be scary, but it is also what makes you powerful. And women like Joe, women like me, we have your back. You're not alone. And uh, that can go into what you just asked about, like how to find the book. Because what I meant for in the book, I wrote it in a conversational style that is hopefully funny and warm and inspiring. Because what I didn't have when I started was a friend to sit alongside me and tell me that I was worth it and tell me that my story was good. And so I want this book, again, from changing diapers to changing the world, why moms make great advocates and how to get started. I would like to be your bedside friend for that, to hold your hand through it. You can find it at my website. I can send you an autographed copy if you're in the United States at www.changyit.com. But Amazon is probably easiest if you're outside of the United States. And if you're in the United States, any independent bookstore or Barnes Noble can also order it for you. And I'd love to connect with you all on social media. I think that you're going to share the socials, or at CCY Levin is me on Instagram and Twitter.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And I want to thank you for all that work, not only the work that you are doing in the United States, but around the world, and then also how you are moving into empowering. I love how it's been a transition for you from being an activist on changing um, the laws and the rules, into now being an activist, into empowering other women to magnify the message, to explore the message, to move into the message a little deeper and faster and better. So thank you so much for everything that you did, and for everybody, please make sure that you reach out for the book, that you learn, and that is in your power to just save one starfish, one little thing. And like Cynthia was saying, we are close. And then also, as darker things go, that is a signal that we are in the right place. I love her message about how you can change the world because you are a mom. And then just being a mom is actually training you with the skills that not other roles have, because you keep that baby alive, because you keep yourself alive, because you keep yourself sane. So thank you so much, Cynthia. It's been a pleasure and an honor to know you. I hug you from my heart, and I thank you for everything that you are doing for changing the world for our children and our children's children. So thank you. And this show can also be heard at the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and leave it.